So many people I had, like throughout my entire life, like family members, people I knew at school, my friends, like nobody believed that I could do this. Like that's why I was a secret for so long. Like I remember I was I kept it secret, and then I went out with my friend and these two girls and ran into these other kids I knew from high school. Now one of them was a giant dick. He was still my friend, but he was like a huge dickhead. And he sits down with us, right? And I remember I told this girl, like, yeah, you know, I want to be a comedian when I grow up. And she says, oh, so you want to be a comedian, right? And this kid just looks at me and just starts laughing at the idea. Like, Tawanda, you can't do that. Like, no one had faith.
Oh, yeah. Like, so many people. Well, that's the hard thing about being a comedian is, or just being a person in general, is just that everyone has a different definition of funny. Everyone has a different definition of their taste in everything, not just things that are funny. And, that, I mean, can be the soul-crushing part of it, is that you really have to believe truly deeply in yourself that you're funny or you're not going to make it. If you're going to rely upon positive reinforcement all the time, you're in the wrong industry.
No, I don't think I've ever had anyone come up to me like after a show and be like, you weren't funny. Except me. Like, I say that to myself. My mantra before I get on stage is they're going to hate me. I said that to myself about 4 or 5 times right before I get up on stage, and it's not helpful at all. It's completely destructive, but it's how this brain works.
Because it's all objective. Like, everybody finds something funny about somebody else. You know, it's you're not going to make everybody laugh. You know, one guy might think you're hysterical, but another guy might think you're not.
Just last night, as a matter of fact, a guy told me that I'm not... He didn't tell me that I'm not funny, but he told me that I'm not as funny as I think I am, which was nice of him to say. But people will tell you, I don't know, like, my experience with people is overwhelmingly positive. But the ones you remember the most are like negative comments and stuff like that. So I think in that case of last night, it was a guy trying to just like break my balls. But you know, I've been on stage and I used to have a joke like my comedy's like FUBU, it's not for everybody. It's just such a dated joke, you can't really even do it. But it's true, like the shampoo thing. Comedy, different types of comedy appeal to different types of people. And every now and then you're just gonna have someone who's not a fan. The internet people are, if I've ever heard I'm not funny the most, it's from people on the internet.
If you post a video on YouTube, you get called faggot, F-A-G-G-E-T a lot, I've noticed. People will tell you to die quite frequently. But I mean, that's the internet. That's how, you know, people that are sad and insecure, they cope with that, I guess. That's fine. You know, there's not every comedian's for everybody. Some people that think fucking Carrot Top's hilarious. Do I necessarily? No, I mean that's not for me. I'm not the target audience. But I've kind of got out of the habit of saying this person's funny or that thing is funny, and I just say, you know, it's not funny to me. That's not fun. That person's not funny to me. I bet there's somebody out there that finds them hilarious.
Every comic has been told they're not funny. Funny story, a few years ago, we're doing a show, a fundraiser for a soccer club in New Jersey. And I had a pretty rough night that night, admittedly. And at the end of the show, this little old lady in the audience comes over to me and goes, in front of the other comedians, what do you do for a living? I said, I do comedy full-time, I don't have a day job. She goes, no, I mean, what do you do for a living? Because it can't be comedy. So, we're all told at some point we're not funny.
I think it can be almost the opposite, but you can find people find when they make other people happy, it makes them feel like happy or they have more value. So I think you could be really sad and be hilarious, because I think you kind of gotta get down to that raw emotion sometimes, like, you know, down to rock bottom or whatever.
No. thought that when I started comedy, and I thought that I would always be in a big group of happy people. But no, that's not exactly what I found. I actually found more comfort in it because everyone's not happy people.
Not necessarily. No, because me, it makes me happy when people laugh. But, you know, you talk to a lot of comics, a lot of them, you know, you meet over the years have issues of their own. And they're doing it for different reasons. Some, they say they go up there, it's their therapy, to be on stage. And some have drinking problems, some have drug problems. And so they're never going to be happy when you have those kind of problems. So, necessarily not every single comic. Most probably, yeah, but not, I say a good number definitely are not, once they're done with the show and they had a great show and they leave, they go back and they're miserable. I think there's more to it than just what you do in life and what you are to make you be happy. You know what I mean?
No, I think there's a lot of myth about if you're happy then you can't be funny and that misery brings humor and all that. I don't know, I think it's just, for me, a lot of it is I really love having this time with a bunch of people, telling jokes and stories and enjoying everything all together. And I think that, you know, that covers a lot of ground. So I don't think being a happy person or a miserable person has really anything to do with how funny you are.
Yeah, people, anyone that says that they haven't bombed before is probably in their first week or so of comedy, or maybe they just don't consider, maybe they're very zen in their approach to what bombing is. But I have bombed epically. I have bombed in front of 300 people, most of whom were motorcycle bikers in a club at a big benefit show, and they were against me from minute number one.
I guess I've had a set or two where it's not the reception you would like. I mean, I've had sets. I did a set for the veterans down on Skid Row in California, and it was just like blinking. It was like throwing pasta at the wall, and it was like probably about 15 minutes because the other people who were on the show didn't show up, and it was like I said, you're just talking and talking and talking, and then later on, like I literally got like just a room full of people blinking at me, and then later on, Justin, who ran the show, he's like, they loved you, you gotta come back, and I'm like, are you sure? He's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. So I mean, that's been a bad and an awkward set, but it wasn't because they didn't like you, I guess.
Oh, I don't think you will ever see interview a comedian who has not bombed. Like, I don't know, every day since like the first time I started doing comedy for the first 6 months would be considered a bomb, but when you're first starting, it almost doesn't count. I think the worst bomb I had was, I had been doing a comedy for a couple years at this point, and I was in like this contest thing, and the first round I went through, but the audience was very young. So the second round of the contest was like a couple of weeks later, and the crowd this time was just a bunch of like 60-year-olds. And I had only been doing comedy for a couple of years, so a lot of my jokes were just not something that like an older crowd would really relate to at all. And that's something I've sort of prepared for now, because I kind of have some jokes in my back pocket that I'm like, I can understand if like somebody a little bit older might not exactly get me, so I have a few things I can sort of pull out. At that point it didn't, and it was just 10 minutes of like silence, and there was probably like 100 people there, and when I first got into it I was kind of horrified, but you have to do your time, so after a while I just sort of accepted that it was going to be the way that it was, and I just did my jokes, and I was like, alright, peace out guys, and that was that.
I haven't had many times where I've just completely bombed at clubs. I can always get like at least some chuckles out of the audience, but I've never really had a time where I've just been like completely nothing. I have had times where parts of my set have done well, and then like I'll end the set and people just like, or I'll start off bad, kind of get them at the end, but certain jokes just don't go over, and that sucks. Because the second, when you're up there if you're getting no fucking response, which is like the worst thing ever. I think that's worse than a boo. Is when you get nothing out of the audience and you just kind of fumble and you're kind of up there like when they're really like laughing with you, it's easy to keep your set going. When there's nothing happening, you really start to question yourself while you're doing your set, which is not good.
One of two things is first of all, I think I'm gonna do great. That's the first bad thought. That's why I tell myself they're gonna hate me, like I said before, because if I go on stage thinking this is gonna be great, then it's not gonna be great. The other times is if I make that fatal mistake of opening with something new, you know, something I think is amazing, and then I realize I can't even articulate what I'm saying, or it just comes out awful. And then you're just looking at these blank stares, and they're looking at you, and then it gets weird, because then you realize that you're there, and they're there, and you're in this shitty moment together. And then you just keep trying to get through it and try to win them back. And then sometimes something amazing happens, and you win them back. But it doesn't happen every time. But you gotta, man. Like, you can't you can't go through life and have anything that you're working on not go right or not go well every time, you know?
I think the worst one was probably where people started looking really just like sad for me. And then it was after that set. It was at a hospital for the faculty, and one of the caterers took me outside and told me I wasn't funny and I should give up and try modeling or something.
We've all bombed. Anybody who says they haven't bombed is lying. We've all had bad nights. We've all had good nights. One of my last shows, I walked off stage because, well, there was one terrible mentally ill / drunk heckler in the audience who killed the whole show pretty much, all three of us. And I walked off stage, and I couldn't buy a laugh. We've all bombed. It's part of the business.
Hecklers, hecklers are difficult because I am not great at crowd work, so what I'm afraid of when I have a heckler is that instead of dealing with something in a funny way, I'll just tell them to kill themselves.
Hecklers. Oh man. I mean, hecklers are good and bad. You know, one thing I can say about Boston comedy is Boston comedy shuts down hecklers like immediately. Like anywhere else you are, not necessarily that they cater to the hecklers, but they pretty much kind of just but in Boston they pretty much shut the hecklers down, and that's a good thing in terms of respect for the room. But I mean, some people feel like you have to be heckled in terms of knowing how to handle it, but I mean, a lot of the times you have people that are either just assholes, they're drunk, or they just want to be in some way, shape, or form part of the show.
I think I've been heckled here a bunch of times. One time I got heckled by a foreign guy, which was very frustrating because like I was going back at him, but he didn't understand what I was saying. He was just smiling, and I was like, "Alright, this is stupid." But I'm not. That's my costume to be a foreign. It's not like I want hecklers, and I don't necessarily respect it, but I think it does come with the show, and if they're not totally obnoxious or drunk, I think sometimes comedians make too big a deal of it, and they like act like you have no right to do it, and I know it can ruin shows, and that's another story, but I think it comes with the territory, you know?
I don't get them that often, but I get them. Everyone's gonna get them. I don't get them a ton, and if I do, I try and roll with it. My like on-stage sort of like persona and who I am, I guess, is more like non-confrontational. I always look at it as like, if you're having a conversation in real life and someone comes up and interrupts you, are you gonna be like, "Shut the fuck up, asshole"? You know? You're not gonna do that. You're gonna be like, "Oh, hold on a second, dude, like I'm talking." Or you might make fun of them in a kind of a nicer way that doesn't like screw with their head. So my act is a little more if someone yells out something. Like a guy heckled me at Laugh Boston on the opening night, and I was just like, "Exactly, sir." And it got like a little bit of a laugh. You move on. He's happy, you're happy, da da da.
My feeling on hecklers has always been, A, they may be right, so take that into consideration. maybe they're right, maybe I should think about what they're saying. As long as you don't break character, heckler's really no problem. When I started out, I was always, very nice and amiable, and if I got a heckler, I had written these terrible lines to put them down and, shoot down the heckler and be that. And I would find I would get a laugh on those lines, but I would lose the audience for the rest because now I wasn't this nice guy trying to share my jokes. All of a sudden, I was this guy who had just been mean to someone. So, as long as you stay in character, if you're a loud, mean comic, just be loud and mean to the heckler. Most of the time, I will just ignore it because I don't want the rest of everyone's night to be ruined by that. And again, for me, stand-up is more of a conversation. Everyone worries about hecklers, but basically, heckler is just another person in the audience. You deal with it.
I got one heckler story that it stands out, and you'll see why it stands out. Because, so there's a naked comedy show, right, run by Andy O'Feish out in Central Square. And I remember I did it once over the summer, right? And that time I did it during the summer, it was fantastic. There's a full audience of like hot, young college girls. It was everything. I loved it. And then I said, oh yeah, I'll do it again. I'll do it in November. So I did it in November. And in November, we get there, and there's maybe 10 audience members scattered around the room. And it's 2 fat girls in the front, and then there's 2 really drunk guys next to them. And I get on stage, and one girl, she looks kind of familiar, but I don't know who she is, but she just looks really disappointed. She looks really sad. Now, I have to mind you, the first time I did the show, it was summertime. The room was very warm, This time, it was really cold, and I'm naked. So I'm cold, and I'm naked. And I'm trying to tell jokes to 10 people. So I'm doing my thing and it's just not going well. And then one guy just starts talking. Then I start going back and forth with him, right? Now, the thing about the naked comedy show that makes it work is that people it's that initial shock, oh my god, they're naked. But after that, you're just like, this is a funny comedy show. But when you get heckled and you stop telling jokes, it just becomes, oh my god, this drunk guy is in an argument with a naked guy. This is very strange. And I ended up making that dude and his friend just walk out of the room. And that's my heckler story. I got heckled while I was naked.